العدو أمامكم والبحر وراءكم. Let me translate this Arabic exhortation into English. The enemy is in front of you and the sea is behind you. This statement has been used across history, in literature as well as in real life, and it was a way of urging soldiers to fight on because neither the enemy in front of them nor the sea behind them were viable alternatives for their survival. I suddenly remembered this statement yesterday as I followed the news informing us that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wanted to take his vengeful war into Rafah, where over 1.3 million Palestinian Gaza residents are sheltering. And Rafah is not simply another place where they've run for cover. It's the last place that adjoins the Gaza Strip to Egypt. In other words, beyond Rafah means Egypt. It implies forcible transfer. It denotes a second Nakba or catastrophe for Palestinians. In other words, becoming refugees again in an unwelcoming environment. Because, let's face it, the Egyptian president doesn't wish to be lumbered with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians on Egyptian soil, even if it is the desert. And why, you might well ask? Well, because the Egyptian economy is in meltdown, but perhaps more crucially, because he isn't too fond of the Muslim Brotherhood to which Hamas belongs, and therefore he's worried that they might end up giving him gyp, to put it mildly, if some of them find themselves in the Egyptian desert too. After all, you might remember the skirmishes in the desert between the Egyptian army and militants some years ago. So going back to the Arabic expression, the Mediterranean Sea, or more cogently, Egypt itself, represents the figurative sea behind Gaza Palestinians who are crammed in a space of 16 kilometers in Rafah, while Israel is the enemy facing them frontally. And what can Palestinians do? Surrendering isn't an option because it means death or worse, captivity. In short, they fight on. And in this fight, 28,000 already killed in Gaza will grow exponentially once, if, let me add, a land invasion is given the green light. But what about outside pressure from friends of Israel to prevent Netanyahu from embarking upon this adventure that forms part of what the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, described recently as a plausible genocide? Let me start with the Arab leaders themselves. Palestinians, as you well know, are mostly Arabs. And so it's taboo to criticize fellow Arabs for being prissy and Janus-faced in their approach to this Gaza-Israel war. It is true that I've heard many statements, some of them quite fiery too, from a few Arab leaders. And I've also witnessed meetings of the Arab League and the foreign ministers in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. They've come up with bog standard denunciations of this war and expressed solidarity with Palestinians. But talking the talk is not the same as walking the walk. Why haven't Arab leaders been more proactive? For instance, a simple matter of those countries having diplomatic relations recalling their ambassadors, or refusing to replace the Red Sea ship consignments by a land route that is transporting goods from China or India, for example, through the UAE to Saudi Arabia and then into Jordan via land in lorries and across into Israel. Or why not even just threaten to cut off or reduce the oil production as King Faisal of Saudi Arabia did in October 1973? I'm not being apocalyptic, and I'm not one who wishes to damage the world economy. But I'm somebody who, though not a supporter of Hamas and its ideologies, is also dead set against a vindictive war against Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Are Arab leaders so wary of Palestinians, so craven too, that they cannot take action, collective action, that goes beyond vacuous words or meetings? Are the Arab and Muslim worlds, I think there are 77 states altogether, incapable of acting more decisively? Or don't they really care? I'm blunt, I know, but a spade remains a spade. And talking about spades, what about the West? My chosen backyard. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is coming up with increasingly strident words of warning against Israel. But they're only words that Prime Minister Netanyahu sniffs at and dismisses quite easily. He's done it for so long. Ditto with Lord Cameron, our Foreign Secretary. Good intentions, but mere words too. Or Josep Borrell, the EU Foreign Minister, who makes statements while the German Foreign Minister, a key EU member state who belongs to the supposedly progressive Green Party, scurries for more meetings with Israeli leaders. Talk, talk, talk. Parole, 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 as the song goes. This is why ordinary people like me, who have no political clout, but perhaps a grain of conscience, question the hypocrisy of such reactions by the Arab world and also by the West. Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, a medical doctor and head of the Palestinian National Initiative, who happens to be in Doha today for the second round of the Palestinian Forum, is painstakingly clear. He holds Israel responsible for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And he never shies away from criticizing the USA either. But he suggests that the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah is obsolescent and in need of replacement by a coalition of all Palestinian movements in order to have one voice in the face of all attempts either at peacemaking or else at undermining the Palestinian presence in Gaza. And don't forget, not only Gaza, but the subtle, albeit understated, agenda of neutering the West Bank too, occupied territories, might I add. Have you seen the ADHD-style settlers empowered by Israeli politicians who wreak havoc across the West Bank and East Jerusalem, including the old city and its quarters? When you listen to this short episode, kindly do not dismiss my words as those of a political hilly-billy, an idealist, or worse, an anti-Semite. That is such an easy slur, after all. What I'm saying reflects my deep concern about human life, divine life, God-given life that's being pummeled and dehumanized in the last 4 months, let alone the past decades. What happened to Israel in the Gaza envelope on 7th October, I repeat, was an egregious crime and a terror attack. But what is happening today in Gaza is plausibly an attempt at genocide, not at self-defense. Do our political leaders just watch, talk, and then go back to their own briefcases? Do they, Nero-like, fiddle while the region is ablaze? العدو أمامكم والبحر وراءكم. Remember that.